Stop scrolling right now, because I need you to hear something. 3 nights ago, at 2:47 in the morning, I was lying in bed when my phone lit up with a security alert. I grabbed it half asleep, knocked it off the nightstand, picked it up off the floor with my heart already going, and squinted at the screen. Someone was in my backyard, again. I pulled up the camera feed, and there she was, dressed head to toe in black, moving through the dark like she owned the place, like she had every right in the world to be there, like this was something she had done before and intended to do again. She didn't have that right. She never had that right. And in about 60 seconds, she was going to find that out in the most spectacularly disgusting way possible. But here is the thing that made this particular night different from every other night in the previous 11 days of absolute chaos. There was a second person in my yard that I did not know about, someone standing in the shadows near my back fence. Someone who had been waiting quietly and patiently for exactly this moment for 3 full months. And that second person had a secret that was going to blow this entire neighborhood apart. My name is your name. And this is the story of how one woman's obsession with my chickens completely unraveled her entire life. How the worst 11 days I have had since moving into this house ended with justice so complete and so perfectly timed that I genuinely had to sit down afterward. And how the most disgusting thing I have ever smelled in my entire life turned out to be the best decision I ever made. Stay with me, because the twist at the end of this story is something I still cannot fully believe happened, and I was standing right there when it did. Let me take you back 6 months before any of this. I had just moved into what I genuinely completely believed was my dream home. A house in a nice suburb, good schools nearby, wide streets with mature trees on both sides, neighbors who actually waved when you pulled into the driveway. The kind of neighborhood where people set out holiday decorations and argue mildly about paint colors and bring casseroles when someone has a baby. The kind of place I'd been working toward for years. And I mean years. I am talking about a decade of working jobs I did not love, living in apartments that were too small, skipping things I wanted to do because I was saving instead. I had a goal, and I kept my eyes on it, and I finally got there. I bought this house, and I stood in the driveway on the first day, and I thought, okay, this is it. This is the thing I worked for. This is where the good part starts. And the very first thing I did after I moved in, before I unpacked the kitchen, before I figured out where the circuit breaker was, before I even set up the internet, was start planning the chicken coop. Now I know exactly what you are thinking. Chickens in the suburbs. It sounds like a lifestyle blog punchline or something a person does after watching too many homesteading videos at 2 in the morning. I understand that reaction, but here is the thing. I grew up on a farm. I grew up with the sound of hens in the early morning, that soft, busy clucking that means everything is fine and the day is starting and the world is in order. I grew up with the smell of fresh straw and the uncomplicated satisfaction of collecting eggs and knowing that you fed something and it gave something back. When I moved to the city in my 20s, I lost all of that. And I did not realize how much I missed it until I had a backyard of my own and the option to get it back. So I built a co-op. And I want to be clear, I did not throw something together out of pallets and wire and hope. I built a proper insulated, ventilated, hand-painted chicken coop with a covered run and a locking door and a little ramp the hens could use to come and go. I was proud of it. My neighbor 2 doors down actually stopped on her walk one morning and said it looked like a tiny house. That felt like a compliment. I sourced 6 hens and I named every single one of them. Fleetwood was first. She was large and confident and walked around the yard like she owned it, which, honestly, she kind of did. She was the one who decided where everyone stood in the pecking order, and once she decided, that was final. Stevie was sweet and a little bit chaotic. She was always the first one to investigate anything new, which meant she was also the first one to get into trouble. I spent a lot of mornings fishing Stevie out of situations. Joan was quiet and dignified, and always looked like she was mildly disappointed in everyone around her. She laid perfect eggs and asked for nothing except to be left to her business. Janice was loud. Janice had opinions. Janice wanted you to know those opinions. She was also my best layer by a significant margin, so I forgave her everything. Aretha. Named with full intention and full respect. She had a presence that the other hens just did not have. When Aretha walked into the yard, you noticed. And Blondie. Blondie was small and golden and gentle in a way that the others were not. She was not the boldest or the loudest or the most impressive. She was just the one who, every single morning without fail, would walk up to wherever I was standing, look up at me for a moment, and then sit down on my boot. Just sit there. Like she was checking in, like she was saying, "Hey, we're good, right? Everything is okay? Yeah, Blondie. We were okay. For a while." Now here is something very important that I want you to know before this story goes where it goes. The chickens were completely legal. I am not the kind of person who moves into a neighborhood and immediately starts breaking the rules. Before I bought a single piece of lumber for that coop, I printed out the full HOA bylaws, which are 43 pages long, and I read every word. I highlighted the relevant section in 3 different colors. Hens, not roosters, specifically hens, were permitted in this community provided the co-op met certain distance requirements from the property line and was maintained in a clean and orderly condition. I met every single requirement. I exceeded them, actually. I had a copy of the relevant bylaws section ready to show anyone who asked. I should have known that would not matter. Because exactly 2 weeks after my flock settled in and started going about their happy chicken lives, she appeared. I want to describe her accurately because I think it matters for you to understand what kind of person we are dealing with. I did not know her name at first. For the first several days, I just thought of her as the visor, because the first thing you noticed, the thing your eye went to before anything else, was this rigid, immovable sun visor sitting on her head at a precise angle that communicated without words that this was a woman who had been attending HOA meetings for over a decade and had never once been told she was wrong about anything. Mid-50s, pressed slacks on a Tuesday afternoon, posture so deliberately correct it looked like a character choice. She had the kind of stillness that some people develop when they have spent a long time being the most important person in a small room. She did not knock on my front door. She did not call out from the sidewalk. She did not leave a polite note in my mailbox. She simply appeared at my back fence one afternoon, standing there silently, staring at the coop with an expression on her face like she had just discovered something morally objectionable. I walked out. I said hello. I smiled. I was friendly because I am, generally speaking, a friendly person. She did not smile back. She said, and I am going to quote this precisely because I have turned it over in my head so many times since, "Those chickens are in violation of the community aesthetic standards." I said, "Actually, I checked the bylaws before I built the coop, and hens under a certain count are permitted provided." She raised one hand, not aggressively, very calmly, the way a teacher raises a hand to stop a student who has misunderstood the assignment. "The bylaws," she said, "are interpreted by the board, and I am the board." She turned around and walked away. I stood there holding a mug of coffee that had gone completely cold. I watched her go, and I felt something in my stomach that was not quite dread and not quite anger, but somewhere in between the two. Okay, I thought, this is going to be something. I genuinely had no idea how much of something it was going to be. I want to be very clear about something before I walk you through what happened next. I did not want a conflict. That is not just something I am saying. It is genuinely true. I had just moved in. I was still living out of half-unpacked boxes. I had a full-time job and a new mortgage and 6 chickens to take care of, and I had absolutely no interest in a neighborhood war with anyone. But she did not give me the option of peace. Day 1. I wake up at 6 in the morning, and immediately, something feels wrong. It is too quiet outside. I go to the back door, look out the window, and the coop door is wide open. Not ajar, not slightly unlatched. Wide open, like someone had deliberately swung it outward and walked away. Fleetwood was on my front porch. Stevie was across the street in someone's front garden. Joan was in my next-door neighbor's flower bed, looking completely unbothered. Aretha was standing on top of a car parked 2 houses down. Janice was inside a bush and objecting loudly to the situation. And Blondie was sitting perfectly calmly in the middle of the road, as if she was waiting for a bus that was running late. I spent an hour and 40 minutes rounding them all up. None of them were hurt. But that coop door had been latched the night before. I had checked it myself before I went to bed. I always checked it before I went to bed. I had no cameras yet, no proof of anything. I bought a padlock the same afternoon and put it on the door. Day 3, 3 in the morning. I am pulled out of a dead sleep by a sound I do not immediately recognize. It is loud and sharp and wrong. Then I hear the hens, and if you have never heard a frightened chicken in the dark, I will tell you it is a sound that goes directly through your chest, high and urgent and impossible to ignore. I ran outside in my pajamas and I found a shattered window on the coop. 2 bricks inside on the floor. Someone had stood at the edge of my property in the middle of the night and thrown bricks at a building containing live animals. I stood in my backyard looking at that broken glass and I felt something change inside me. That was not an accident. That was not kids messing around. That was an intentional act by someone who knew those animals were inside and did not care. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA in writing the next morning. I sent an email and followed up with a phone call. The response I received was as follows: "We will look into the matter and respond within the standard 14 business day window." 14 business days for someone throwing bricks at animals in the middle of the night. I called the non-emergency police line. They came out, they were polite, they photographed everything and wrote a report and told me that without a suspect or camera footage, there was not much they could do. They suggested I invest in security cameras. So I did. I ordered 4 of them that same night, had them installed by the end of the week. Day 7. I am sitting at my desk at work, in the middle of a completely ordinary Wednesday, when my phone buzzes with a motion alert. I open the app expecting a bird or a delivery driver, and instead, I see a woman standing inside my locked fence. Not near it, not leaning over it, inside it, with a bucket in her hand, moving toward the coop. I tell my coworker I have a family emergency. I drive home doing 15 over the speed limit the entire way. By the time I get there, the yard is empty and the gate is relocked from the outside. But I have the footage. I have her face. I have the timestamp. I have the duration. I have her crouching near the base of the coop, with that bucket doing something I cannot quite make out on the recording. I print a clear still from the footage, and I walk to her house and I knock on her door. When she opens it, she looks at the photo. Then she looks at me. Her expression does not change. No embarrassment, no surprise, no apology. Perfect, absolute calm. "Board members," she says, "have the right to conduct property inspections for bylaw compliance. Inside my locked fence," I say, without prior notice, with a bucket, on a Wednesday afternoon? She begins a sentence about the bylaws. I do not let her finish it. "Get off my property," I tell her, "right now, and do not come back. Because the next time you step foot inside my fence without my permission, you will be explaining yourself to a lawyer, not to me." My hands were shaking when I walked back to my car. Not from fear, from a kind of anger I do not feel very often. The particular specific fury of having your space violated by someone who does not even have the decency to pretend they were wrong. Day 9. I need you to stay with me for this part, because this is the day everything changed. Up until day 9, I was dealing with harassment and property damage. It was serious, it was exhausting, but I was managing it. I was documenting, I was filing reports, I was keeping my head down and trusting that the process would eventually work. Day 9 is when I stopped trusting the process. I came home from an errand around mid-morning and the yard was too quiet. You have to understand, 6 hens are never quiet. They have commentary on everything: the weather, what you are wearing, whether you are walking too fast. A silent chicken yard is a wrong chicken yard. I opened the gate, I walked to the run, and I found Blondie lying on her side in the far corner. I am not going to describe in detail what that looked like. I will just tell you that I knew, immediately and completely, that she had not died of natural causes, and that I sat down on the ground next to her for a moment before I picked her up. I took her to the emergency vet. The vet was kind and thorough and direct. Rodenticide, rat poison. Introduced somewhere Blondie could access it. This was not an accident. This was not something she found wandering. Someone had placed it deliberately. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. Someone had deliberately, intentionally, knowingly poisoned my chicken. A 5-month-old hen who sat on my boot every single morning and asked for nothing in the world except a little grain and a good patch of sunlight. I drove home. I checked on the other 5. They were subdued the way animals get when the group has lost someone, not grieving in any way I could name, but quieter, closer together, less interested in the yard. I refilled their water. I checked their food. And then I stood there for a while, looking at the coop I had built with my own hands, and the yard I had been so proud of, and the fence that was clearly not keeping anyone out who wanted to get in. And I made a decision. This was going to end. Not eventually, not through the proper channels at their 14 business day pace. Now. One way or another, this was going to end now. I need to say something clearly before I explain what I built. What I built was not dangerous. It was not harmful. It was not going to injure anyone or cause any physical damage beyond the kind of damage that can be undone with a long shower and a very thorough scrubbing. I was not trying to hurt anybody. I was trying to document somebody, and I was trying to do it in a way that was so undeniable, so visceral, so completely impossible to explain away that no 14 business day review window could make it disappear. Here is something I learned growing up on a farm that turns out to have remarkably broad applications in adult life. Fermented organic material is a force of nature. Specifically, chicken droppings, used bedding straw, and standing muddy water, sealed in a container in summer heat for approximately 1 week, produce a smell that I do not have adequate language for. It is not merely unpleasant. It is the kind of smell that registers in the brain as a threat, the kind of smell that makes your eyes water from across the yard. The kind of smell that, once it is on you, does not leave quickly or easily regardless of what you do about it. It is not toxic. It is not caustic. It will not cause any harm whatsoever beyond making the person it contacts absolutely, completely, legendarily miserable. I call it chicken sludge. I made 50 gallons of it in a sealed drum over the course of 1 week. I kept it in the far corner of my yard, and I want to tell you that even with the drum sealed, I could smell it from the back door, and I had to explain to my neighbor that I was composting aggressively. Then I built the mechanism. I am genuinely proud of the engineering here. I want that on record. I rigged a pulley system to the frame directly above the coop door. The drum sat on a platform that was connected to the pulley via a trigger wire attached to the door handle. The system was calibrated, and I spent 2 full evenings on this calibration, so that if you open the door slowly, the way a person who was supposed to be there would open it, nothing happened. The door opened normally, the hens were accessible, everything was fine, but if you grabbed the handle and yanked it open quickly, the way someone would if they were in a hurry, the way someone would if they were trying to get in and out fast in the dark without being seen, the sudden force triggered the pulley release, and 50 gallons of week-old fermented chicken sludge dropped straight down from the platform above the door frame. I tested the mechanism 8 times. I wanted to be absolutely sure the slow open was reliable and the fast open trigger was consistent. I am not a person who does things by half measures when the situation calls for thoroughness. Then I waited. I went about my life. I fed the hens. I went to work. I ate dinner, watched television, did laundry like a normal person. I kept my cameras rolling and I checked the feed every night before bed. Monday night, nothing. Tuesday night, nothing. Wednesday, Thursday, nothing. Friday night. I go to bed at 11:30. I fall asleep quickly because the week has been long. 2:47 in the morning. My phone vibrates so hard on the nightstand it sounds like something falling. I grab it, pull up the feed. And there she is, head to toe in black. I mean that literally. Black shoes, black pants, black jacket, black gloves. She had thought about this outfit. She had made deliberate choices about this outfit. She was moving across my backyard toward the coop with slow, careful steps, the way a person moves when they believe they are being invisible and have no idea they are on 4 different camera angles in high definition. I am sitting up in bed, fully awake now, watching this on my phone, and I am aware that my heart is going very fast and my hands are steady. She reaches the coop. She stops for just a moment, looks around, looks back at the fence she came over. She reaches out and wraps her hand around the door handle. I realize I'm holding my breath. She yanks it. I have genuinely struggled to find language for what happens on that footage in the next 4 seconds. The sludge comes down like a wall, like a tidal wave in miniature. It is not a splash. It is a complete and total engulfment. Head to toe, every surface, no part of her is untouched. The sound on the camera is audible even through my phone speaker. She goes down on her back almost instantly because the ground beneath her is immediately completely slick. She tries to get up. She goes back down. She tries again. She makes it to her knees. She is making sounds that I will be tactful enough not to describe. She eventually gets to her feet. She takes 3 steps toward the back fence and goes down again. She gets up. She makes it to the fence. She gets over it. And this takes significantly longer than getting over a fence typically takes. And she disappears into the dark. I sat in my bedroom, staring at my phone screen in complete silence. And then I started laughing. Deep, genuine, involuntary laughter of the kind you cannot control. I laughed until I had to put the phone down. I laughed until my eyes watered. I laughed the way you laugh when something has been terrible for a very long time, and then something finally, completely, perfectly goes right. Then I stopped, and I watched the footage again, more slowly this time, full frame, all 4 camera angles, and that is when I saw the second person, far corner of the yard, near the back fence, half behind my garden shed, standing completely, absolutely still. An older woman I had never seen before in my life, not moving, not helping, not reacting, just watching, with what I could only describe, even on night vision footage, as the posture of someone who had exactly what they came for. I did not sleep for the rest of that night. Not from fear or anxiety, from pure, relentless curiosity about who that woman was and why she was in my yard. She had not come over the fence the way Karen had. She must have been there before I set the trap, possibly before I went to bed. She had been standing in my yard, in the dark, in silence, waiting. For what? The next morning at 10 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there was a woman in her late 60s, silver hair, neat, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, good posture, but the kind that comes from confidence rather than performance. She was holding a ceramic plate covered in cling wrap containing what appeared, through the wrap, to be snickerdoodles. She looked at me and said, "I owe you an explanation, and probably an apology, and possibly a conversation that is going to reframe everything you think you know about the last 11 days. May I come in?" I looked at the cookies. I looked at her. I stepped back and held the door open. Her name was Margaret. Karen, and I will keep using that name because it is not her real name, had married Margaret's son 16 years ago. They had 2 children together, a girl who was 9 and a boy who was 11. Margaret spoke about those grandchildren the way people speak about the most important things in their lives, not with sentiment exactly, with weight. The marriage, she told me, had been deteriorating for years, quietly, without drama, in that grinding, slow way that some marriages end, not with a single catastrophic event, but with a long accumulation of distance and disappointment, until 2 people who had once chosen each other had become, without either of them making a conscious decision about it, strangers who lived in the same house. Her son had filed for divorce 8 months ago. Karen had not taken it well. She became, Margaret said carefully, focused. She needed to be in control of something. The HOA had always been an interest of hers, but after the filing it became something else. A place where she could have authority, where she could make decisions and enforce them, where she could be right. I was beginning to understand the woman who had appeared at my fence. But that is not the whole story, Margaret said. When my son filed for divorce and began pursuing shared custody, Karen made certain communications to him and to me that I would describe as threatening. She told my son that if he pushed for more than minimal custody, she would make the proceedings as difficult as possible in every way available to her. And she told me, directly, on a phone call that I was not yet recording, that if I testified on my son's behalf, she would ensure I had no relationship with my grandchildren. She used a phrase. She said she would disappear them from my life, and she said it in a way that made me take it very seriously. The snickerdoodles were on my coffee table. I had not touched them. I was listening with my complete and total attention. "I want to be clear that I am not an impulsive person," Margaret said. "I spent 31 years as a paralegal in family law. I have seen how these situations work. I know what courts need, and I know what does not hold up. So when I decided that the right thing to do was to document Karen's behavior and provide that documentation to my son's attorney, I did it carefully, I did it thoroughly, and I did it over time." "How long?" I asked. 3 months, she said, before last night. She reached into the bag she had brought with her and set a small professional-grade camera on my coffee table next to the snickerdoodle plate. "I have been following her on the nights when I had reason to believe she was planning something," Margaret said. "Last night she left her house at 2:15 in clothes that made her intention clear. I followed her here. I let myself through your side gate. I apologize for that. I will explain why I did not knock. And I waited. You waited," I said. I needed her on camera doing what she came here to do," Margaret said. "I needed documentation of the behavior, not just the aftermath. And She paused again, and something moved across her face. I was genuinely not expecting what happened with the door. "The sludge," I said. She looked at me very seriously for a moment. And then Margaret, this 60-something retired paralegal with silver hair and reading glasses and a plate of snickerdoodles, said, "The sludge was extraordinary." Margaret left that morning with her footage and her plan and her empty cookie plate. I stood at my front door and watched her drive away, and I sat with the particular feeling of a story that has just become significantly larger than you thought it was. I had my footage. She had her 3 months. Between the two of us, we had something that a court could work with. I started to feel, for the first time in 11 days, that this might actually resolve. I should have known it was not going to be that simple. It was a Saturday morning. I was in my kitchen making coffee. 10:15. And I heard a sound that I identified wrong at first. I thought something had fallen over in the yard. Then it happened again and again, rhythmic and hard, and I put the mug down and walked to the back door. Karen was standing in my yard with a baseball bat. She was hitting the coop, not in a rage. That is what I keep coming back to when I remember it. She was not screaming or crying or out of control. She was hitting it with a kind of grim, methodical efficiency, like this was a task on a list that she had decided needed to be done today. I walked out onto the porch and said her name. She stopped. She looked at me, and her face was something I was not prepared for. She did not look angry. She looked exhausted in a way that went very deep, the kind of exhaustion that is not about sleep, but about something that has been wrong for a long time. "The whole neighborhood is laughing at me," she said. "Put the bat down," I said. She looked down at the bat, back up at me. "I just wanted things to be right," she said. "That is all I have ever wanted. I wanted a neighborhood where people followed the rules and kept things the way they were supposed to be, and did not just do whatever they felt like because they had decided the rules did not apply to them. Is that so unreasonable? Is that actually an unreasonable thing to want?" Her voice was very controlled. That was the thing that unnerved me more than anger would have, the control. And then she said something that I have thought about nearly every day since. She said, "I killed your chickens because they were happy, and I haven't been happy in 8 years. I am going to give that sentence the silence it deserves. Because I have turned it over and over, and I still don't know exactly what to do with it. On one level, it is the most honest thing she ever said to me. On another level, it is the most devastating sentence I have ever heard someone say about themselves. On a third level, it does not change anything about what she did. Blondie is still gone. That sentence does not bring her back. But I stood there and I let it land because it deserved to land." Then Karen straightened up. The exhaustion was gone, or at least it was put away again. She reached into her jacket pocket and took out her phone. "I have footage of Margaret," she said. 3 months of her following me, entering properties she had no right to enter, recording me without my knowledge. If she walks into that courtroom with anything against me, I will present my documentation, and her credibility will be gone entirely. The court will see a woman who is stalking her son's estranged wife, and everything she has gathered will be contaminated. She looked at me with clear, steady eyes. "I want to offer you a resolution," she said. "You delete your footage of the sludge and of me on your property. I delete my footage of Margaret. She deletes hers. Everything goes away and we all move on." I looked at her for a long time. I thought about Blondie. I thought about Margaret at my kitchen table with her cookies and her camera and her 31 years of family law. I thought about those 2 grandchildren Karen had mentioned threatening to disappear from Margaret's life. And I said, "Okay." She had not expected that. I could see it. "Show me," she said. I took out my phone. I opened my camera roll. I opened my cloud backup application. She watched me. She was standing close enough that she could see the screen clearly. I selected the files. I deleted them. I opened the trash. I hit empty trash. I turned the screen toward her so she could see the confirmation message. She watched my thumb press the button. A smile appeared on her face. Small and controlled, but real. The smile of someone who has just won something. She looked at me one more time. Then she turned and walked out of my yard with that same perfect, deliberate posture she always carried. Spine straight, visor level, every step a statement. I watched her go. I stood at my back fence for a moment after she left, and then I heard footsteps. I turned around. Margaret was standing at my side gate. She had, apparently, been there for the last 15 minutes. She had the camera. She had heard every word. She looked at me with an expression I can only describe as the face of a person who has spent 31 years in family law and has seen this exact kind of moment before and knew with absolute certainty exactly how it was going to end. She reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and took out a small rectangular hard drive. One of those portable ones that fits in your palm. She held it up. "You think," she said, "that I have spent 3 months building documentation on a single device with no redundancy?" She looked almost amused. I was a paralegal in family court for 31 years. I stared at the drive. She continued, "This drive contains the complete 3-month record, the footage of Karen entering properties without permission, the audio recording of the phone call in which she threatened to remove the children from my life, which is legal in this state because I was a participant in the conversation, the footage of the brick incident, which I captured from my own property across the street, all of the footage from last night, including the trap and everything that followed. And," she added, "the recording I just made of Karen's offer, and of Karen watching you appear to delete your evidence while believing you had deleted mine." "She knew," I said slowly. "She suspected I might have documentation," Margaret said. "She did not know the extent of it. She did not know about the phone recording. She did not know about the brick footage. And she absolutely did not know that I was standing at your gate for the last 15 minutes with a running camera. I looked at this woman, this retired paralegal with silver hair and reading glasses, who had come to my door with snickerdoodles and blown the entire situation open. You knew from the beginning how this was going to go," I said. "I had a reasonable hypothesis," she said, "and I prepared accordingly." She submitted everything to her son's attorney that same afternoon. The attorney filed a motion the following morning. The hearing was expedited given the specific nature of the evidence: documented animal poisoning, documented property destruction, a recorded verbal confession to both, a recorded threat against a potential witness, and 3 months of a consistent pattern of escalating behavior by a person seeking shared custody of 2 children. 12 days after that Saturday morning in my yard, Karen was served with an emergency temporary custody order, granting her husband primary custody of both children pending the full hearing. The same day, she was served with a restraining order prohibiting any contact with me, with my property, or with my animals. She moved out of the neighborhood 22 days later. The house went to her husband as part of the settlement. She found an apartment across town. The children stayed with their father and see their mother on a schedule that the court determined. The HOA received a formal letter from an attorney on behalf of 5 households documenting Karen's conduct over the previous 3 years. I was not, it turned out, the first person she had targeted. I was simply the first one who had documented it completely enough that something could be done. The board held an emergency session, removed the relevant bylaws she had been using as weapons, issued letters of apology to all 5 households, and quietly revised their inspection procedures. Margaret brought me cookies 3 weeks after it all ended. Chocolate chip this time. She said snickerdoodles were for introductions and chocolate chip was for occasions worth celebrating. We sat on my back porch together. Fleetwood was conducting her afternoon inspection of the yard's perimeter. Stevie was doing something of questionable wisdom near the garden beds. The other 3 were doing whatever hens do in the afternoon when everything is fine and the world is in order. Margaret told me about her grandchildren, what they liked, how long it had been since she had seen them, how her son had called her the night the custody order came through, and neither of them had said much on the phone, but she had heard him exhale, and that exhale had told her everything. I told her about Blondie, what she was like, the boot thing, how 5 months is not a long time, but it is long enough to matter. We sat there for a while in the specific kind of quiet that settles over a situation when something that was very wrong has finally, properly been made right. I have been thinking about this story since it ended, turning it over, looking at it from different angles. And I want to be honest with you about what I actually think, because I do not want to give you the version of this that is just clean and satisfying and emotionally simple. Because it is not entirely any of those things. The outcome I wanted happened. Karen faced real consequences. The harassment stopped permanently. My remaining hens are safe. Margaret got what she needed for the custody case. 2 children are in a more stable situation than they were before. By almost any reasonable measure, justice was served. And yet, I keep coming back to that sentence. I killed your chickens because they were happy, and I haven't been happy in 8 years. I want to be absolutely clear that this does not excuse what she did, not even slightly. Blondie was a living creature, and she is gone because of a deliberate choice this woman made. And I do not minimize that, or move past it, or find a frame that makes it okay. It is not okay. It was a cruel act, and it deserved the consequences it received. But I am also capable of holding that truth alongside a different and harder truth, which is this. Whatever Karen was when she appeared at my fence, she had not always been that person. Something had happened over 8 years or more that had taken a human being and ground her down into someone who was standing in a stranger's yard at 3 in the morning, in tactical black, trying to hurt animals. That does not happen without a significant amount of accumulated pain. I am not her therapist. It is not my job to fix whatever went wrong in her life. The consequences she faced were appropriate, but I am a person who thinks about things, and I have thought about what it must feel like to be that far gone, to be that unhappy for that long with nowhere to put it except at a fence line, at a locked gate, at someone else's chickens. It is just sad. Under everything else, it is just genuinely sad. I think about Margaret more easily. Margaret is someone I can think about without complication. This woman who decided that the thing she was going to do, the specific, particular, committed thing she was going to do, was to spend 3 months building an airtight case because 2 grandchildren needed protecting. Who did it without drama, without confrontation, without losing her composure once? Who showed up at my door with snickerdoodles and turned the whole situation inside out in the most methodical, careful, professional way imaginable? If you are ever in a situation where something is going wrong and the proper channels are failing you, you want a Margaret. You want someone who is not reactive, who does not need the satisfaction of the argument, who just quietly, relentlessly documents until the moment comes. I think about the sludge too, and what it actually meant beyond the obvious satisfaction of it. It was not the first thing I tried. I want that to be clear. I spent 11 days trying to do everything correctly. I read the rules, I followed the process, I filed reports, I sent emails, I made calls. I gave every official channel every opportunity to work, and none of it worked. The HOA had a 14 business day review window. The police needed evidence they did not yet have. The process was real, but it was slow, and Karen knew it was slow, and she used that slowness. Sometimes the process works perfectly, and sometimes the process works perfectly for the person who is willing to abuse it most aggressively. In that situation, you have to find a different way to create evidence that cannot be dismissed or delayed. 50 gallons of fermented organic material dropped from a pulley system onto a woman who had poisoned my chicken turned out to be, in its way, a masterpiece of documentation. It was impossible to explain away. It was time-stamped. It was on 4 camera angles. It was the thing that made every other piece of evidence cohere into a story that the court could not ignore. I would do it again. I will not pretend otherwise. Okay, I have been talking for a while now, and I genuinely need to hear from you. Because here is the honest question I want you to wrestle with in the comments. When Karen came to me that Saturday morning with her offer, delete your footage, I delete mine, Margaret deletes hers, everyone walks away, I agreed. I deleted my footage in front of her. I did not tell her about Margaret's backup drive. I did not tell her that Margaret had been at the gate recording everything. And because of that choice, the evidence that put those consequences in motion was preserved and used. Was that my choice to make? I did not go looking for her divorce. I did not go looking for her custody battle. All of that came to my door, but I made a choice in that moment about what information to share and what to withhold. And the consequences of that choice extended well beyond my property line and my chicken coop into a family situation that was not originally mine to be part of. Some people will say, you did what was necessary. Those children are safer. A woman who poisons animals and threatens her mother-in-law over a custody case is not a woman who deserves the benefit of the doubt. You did not manufacture the evidence. You did not set Karen up. She did everything herself, and you simply did not stop it from being documented. Other people will say it was not your situation. You let yourself become a participant in a family legal matter. You withheld information during what was essentially a negotiation. Whatever Karen did, using her worst moments to influence a custody outcome for her children, is something you should have stepped further back from. I think about this more than I probably let on. I believe I made the right call. I believe those children are in a better situation than they would have been. But I do not think it was clean or simple or without complication, and I am not going to pretend otherwise just because the ending was satisfying. Tell me what you think. Drop your honest verdict in the comments. Were my hands clean? Did I overstep? Did I do exactly what the situation called for? I will read every comment and I will respond to as many as I can because I genuinely want to know where people land on this. Also, this is a separate request and it is a real one. Drop your city in the comments. Just the city. I want to see the map of where this story landed. Last time, we had 43 countries represented in the comments, and I lost my mind looking at that list. I want to see if we can do more. If you made it to the end of this story, If you sat with it, felt something, maybe felt your stomach drop at the parking lot scene, or your jaw clench at the baseball bat, or your heart do something complicated at the sentence about not being happy for 8 years, then please hit subscribe. Because this neighborhood continues to produce at a rate that I find both completely exhausting and genuinely deeply entertaining. There are more stories. I am going to tell them. And before you go, leave a comment that says "Justice for Blondie." Just those 3 words. Nothing else required. Because she was 5 months old and she sat on my boot every morning and she was killed by someone who resented her for being happy. And the least she deserves is to be remembered by people who understand exactly why she mattered, even if they never met her. I will see you in the next one. Take care of the things you love. And if someone gives you a reason, you know what to do. Make the sludge.